You're good to go.
All right. Awesome sauce. Hello, everyone. This is Blind Adam, the Comic Pimp. This is Awesome Sauce Radio. Yes, your eyes do not deceive you. It is 2 in the afternoon, and we're doing a special after school special edition of Awesome Sauce Radio. And today's uh, guest is a legendary writer. She wrote one of the greatest runs that Daredevil ever made. She is the co-creator of one of my favorite supervillains of all time, Mojo. She also created Longshot. She has an amazing career as a journalist, a filmmaker, an author. She's done it all. Uh, and Cindy, how are you?
Hi. Nice to meet you, Awesome Sauce. Adam.
Yes. Uh, so, you know, I'm wondering, how did you get your start in the industry?
It was a long time ago, and it was before the movies and before the internet. And so it was a lot easier to get into the business than it is today because the movies are so powerful and making so much money, and the IP has become very valuable. But when I first started, there were no movies, and they were like newsprint newsstand comics. And I went up there and I answered an ad in the newspaper because it was pre-internet. And I went up and I got interviewed by Jim Shooter, and he hired me to be his assistant. Now, I was a terrible secretary. I mean, really bad. So I think Jim just wanted to get rid of me. And so he moved me in up to assistant editor work. And that's where I think I started with Al Milgram, and then Carl Potts, and then Louise Jones, with Weezy Simonson, and
Yeah,
then
every time I hear her maiden name, I have to remember that's what Wiz Simonson now.
yes, she was married to Jeff Jones, and so she was Louise Jones, but we all called her Wheezy. And then she married Walt Simonson. So she's Wheezy, she's Louise Jones, she's Louise Simonson. She has many names.
And you also, had a nice step at editing the X Men. What are some of your fond memories of that?
I mean, Chris is a blast to work with. When you work with a talent like that and they're just bubbling with enthusiasm constantly and have a billion ideas, your job is really quite easy. You just pick the best of the 50 ideas Chris throws at you. And he had a very infectious, I mean, I learned a lot from Chris because he had a very infectious way of falling in love with his own characters in a way that was very contagious. And I kind of learned through him, like, how these characters are alive to creators and readers. And I think that was, had a big impact on me. And now that I'm writing Storm, a story that takes place exactly when I was, I think, assistant editor, when Louise Simonson and Paul Smith and Chris Claremont decided to give Storm the punk look.
Yes, I actually just read the Storm issue 1, about a half an hour ago, and
Oh, did you like it?
I love. I want to thank you because I'm going through a lot in my personal life right now. I'm dealing with a health issue, and I have to go
Oh,
get another set of testing next week. So I'm a little nervous right now. So
oh,
what Storm 1 did for me is it brought me back to my childhood,
oh,
and it allowed me to really revisit a beautiful time period in my life.
oh, that's so sweet.
Because when I was first going blind, I had a friend of mine. She gave me two comic books. She gave me a dareDevil issue, and she gave me Classic X-Men 1.
Oh.
And Classic X-Men 1, you know, through that opening scene with Nightcrawler, helped me, along with dareDevil, helped me become the visually impaired person I am today. Where I said this would just be a part of me, and I would never let it stop me.
It's interesting to hear you say that. When I was first given the assignment to write dareDevil, I lived on 26th and 6th Street in Manhattan, and there was a school for the blind
Is
on
that the
20.
one on 23rd?
Yes, on 23rd Street. And so I would go over there and sort of sit outside or go in and talk to people. And right around the corner, there was a bar. I think it was called the Angry Squire. And a lot of the blind people would come into the bar. And I would sit with them, and they would it was so much fun. They would say things like, "I smell perfume. Can you tell me what she looks like?" And I'd be like, "Oh, she's beautiful." And, it was like, it was really interesting to learn um, how they navigated the world through feelings and senses and smell. And then they would ask me, like, "Is she cute? Is she looking at me?" It was a lot of like funny stuff like that. And I have a handicap. I can only hear in one ear. The other one is dead. And so I used to tell them, it's weird. I can feel someone or feel their footsteps coming towards me on my deaf side before I hear them. And so it was like a perfect place for me to kind of think about and understand dareDevil.
Yes. Like I said, I said this in the first message that when we messaged. Your run on dareDevil is one of the things that really helped me for the darkest period of my life when I was first going blind at the age of 14.
Oh.
And I don't know if I would be sitting talking to anyone today if it wasn't for comic books and movies, and especially when I was figuring out how to get around with a cane. Whenever I get frustrated, I can go to a dareDevil comic and be like, "All right, you want to give up? No, I can't ever."
Oh. Oh, that's wonderful. I think comics, films, books, movies. I mean, when I was a teenager and I was living in suburbia, and suburbia was kind of boring, and I could see, I mean, on the television, there was like the Vietnam War and Vietnam War protests and like rock and roll and all this stuff on the TV that was like, I got to get out of this house, and go join the world. And my escape was books. We didn't have comics in our houses, but my escape was reading the literature that showed me a world outside of suburbia and helped me get out of there.
Yes. Uh, so speaking of books, I find this very fascinating as I did my research. How did you come up with the characters of Longshot and Mojo?
Longshot and Mojo, when I think it was either Carl Potts or Louise Simonson, one of my one of my mentors, because one of the great things about Marvel Comics in the 80s is you had the bullpen, you had all the artists and writers and working right in the office together. And Carl and Wheezy were like, "Why don't you try writing a comic?" And I had done Spider Woman, and I had done, Denny O'Neil gave me my very first job. And they said, "Well, why don't you try your own creation?" And I had no idea what to do. And so I decided Longshot would be like a blank slate, like a alien who drops to Earth and has no idea what's going on, but is adapts and rolls with it. And Mojo, Spiral, and Major Domo were like, to me, a triad that were stuck together with no exit from each other. That Mojo was definitely a commentary on what was changing at the time with the rise of media companies buying each other. And there was a concept that Noam Chomsky, a great author, wrote about called manufacturing consent, where news organizations were all owned by each other and media was becoming more of a conglomerate, and you were getting like less variety of voices. So, and this is pre-internet. So Mojo was kind of back then, it was about how we were all glued to our TVs, because there was no internet yet.
Yeah.
And so, and there were so few channels. I mean, you can't imagine. There were like, you had 2, 4, 5, 7, 11, and 13. That was it.
Yeah. Like I said, I always loved the fact that Mojo was the guy who controlled his whole planet for TV programming. I always found that interesting, even as made me want to study the power that media has over everyone in that regard.
Oh yeah, and now you see it's like beyond, it's escalated beyond anything we could imagine. I mean,
oh yeah,
if we back then, no one could have imagined that there would be, an artificial intelligence generating news stories and images.
Oh, definitely.
If I had a time machine, I would have given Mojo that power back in the 80s.
Oh yeah. I could just imagine it. What was it like working with one of my favorite artists of all time, John Romita Jr.?
Johnny is, one of the most awesome collaborators because, again, to go back to the 80s, we were all, everybody was in the office. So Johnny would come in and out of the office. His mom and dad worked in the office. Virginia Romita, to me, is one of the unsung heroes of Marvel Comics. She was the traffic manager and she kept all the books on time. I mean, I think before Virginia started, the books would regularly miss shipping and be late to the newsstands. Virginia just, I don't know what, she had this superpower. Her superpower was like, she'd come into your office and you would just drop everything you were doing and say, I know I'm late, I'll get ready, So you had John Romita Sr. was in charge of the bullpen and the Romita Raiders. He was right there. So if you had a problem with a cover, like a battle, a 2-character battle scene that wasn't quite working on a cover, you just bring it to John Romita and he would like slap a piece of vellum on it, draw it, redraw it so that it was better, and then you send it back to the artist. Virginia was there keeping your books on time. And then their son, John Romita, was sort of just starting out. And we would just talk like, what do you feel like drawing? And Johnny would come in. I remember once Johnny came in one day and he was like, I just saw this dude on the street. Put him in the comic. His name is Shotgun, and here's what he looks like. And I was like, yes, and there's so many things. Like I ran into him at a con recently, and he said to me, we had done this comic, A Beer with the Devil. And Johnny was like, we were talking about how Johnny had come into the office and said, this Catholic guy, Matt Murdock, he wears a devil suit. Why don't we have him have a beer with God? And I was like, cool, yes. And then that evolved into A Beer with the Devil. And then Johnny was like, Mephisto, he's the devil. Me and Johnny are Italian, raised Catholic. And Johnny was like, the devil shouldn't just be in a red spandex suit, he's the devil. So Johnny came up with this new design that showed that the devil's tentacles are everywhere. And that was all Johnny, and When you
It's
work
one of
with
the
an
greatest.
artist,
Year with the Devil, dareDevil issue 266 is one of the greatest single comics of all time.
oh, thank you. Well, that was a total artist writer collaboration. Like we sat together and it came from something real. I had broken up with my boyfriend at the time, uh, right before Christmas, which was a stupid move because then I was like, dang, I've got nowhere to go on Christmas. And it was like Christmas Eve. And I went down to a bar and I met all these people. And I was like, there's a lot of people in New York who have nowhere to go on Christmas Eve. And they were all there. And I listened to their stories. And then Johnny came up with more ideas for the story. And of course, I couldn't do the issue for a whole year because Christmas was then past, so it was kind of like set for, timed for the next year's Christmas.
Yeah, it really. I just actually reread that too through my adaptive technology, and it still holds up.
What kind of adaptive technology do you have? It
I
reads.
use a text reader, which reads me text. I also have an app that will connect me to a sighted volunteer who
Oh,
describe anything digital in front of me.
oh, nice, nice. And do you like the voices? Do they tell the story in different voices? And
Um, let's see. I for comics with a lot of art, I will go to someone who's a sighted volunteer, and the one app is called Ira. I I think it's a lot of you know actresses who are just getting their start, just volunteering at times because
oh,
some of them do a really good job.
well, do you want to? That would be an amazing thing for people to know about. Like, if you read daredevil comics, you should go volunteer at this site if you've got a good voice. What's it called again?
Ira,
Ira.
yeah, I put in links. I always want to know what went into the creation of Typhoid Mary.
I mean, Typhoid Mary was, again, it was John Romita Jr. and me talking. And, we were talking about how women are portrayed in comics. They were sort of either somebody's wife or someone's girlfriend or a secretary or something. There weren't a lot of, you had Spider Woman and you had uh, Invisible Girl, but even in the Fantastic Four, it was kind of ironic that she was the invisible one. So we came up with this idea to have a character that was kind of all the stereotypes of females. She's innocent, she's sexy, she's a feminist, and roll them all into one character so that she can use. And then the main idea was you want to look at your hero and think, how can you really mess with your hero? I mean, it's mean, but sometimes us writers, we have to think, what would really mess Matt Murdock up? And we decided it would be if Matt Murdock and dareDevil fell in love with two different people that they didn't know was the same person. And so Mary, innocent Mary, who lures Matt into feeling protective of her. And then Typhoid Mary lures dareDevil into being like crazy for her. And it's kind of like Frank Miller had, and Roger McKenzie and all the writers before me had set up that dareDevil liked these wild, bad girls like Elektra, but he also liked the whole protecting the helpless. Like Karen Page was, always in trouble and a junkie. And so we kind of took the two sides of Matt and gave him one girl that he didn't know he was each one. So it was sort of a great triangle because Karen was also getting very upset because, can you imagine if your partner comes home every night with blood on their hands? I mean, she was kind of like, really? Every night you come home with blood on your hands? So that was just a great fun for me. And Johnny, um, his girlfriend at the time, they were going to some party, and apparently she stepped out of the bathroom all ready to go, and she was dressed like Typhoid Mary. And Johnny adapted what she was wearing, and that became her costume.
Oh wow.
So, those were the days when you were always on the phone and with the artist or meeting with the artist. And so there was a lot of um, collaborative energy. And I think that's a lot why dareDevil worked, because Johnny and I were both in New York. And when I would say something like, wow, I'm on the subway, what's it like? What's everybody thinking? Johnny would just get it instantly. Yeah, because he's been on the subway and he's wondered, what is everyone thinking? And then when we took dareDevil to
I'm on
hell,
the subway. I wonder what people are thinking too.
yeah, it's sort of like such a natural thing. So, and we would just be like, well, there's Hell's Kitchen right there. Oh, some kids go by on skateboards, or there's some nuts like driving their car while they're on their roofs. Let's put that in the comic. So a lot of what was in that run was stuff that we saw on the streets of New York in the 1980s, which were a crazy time because it was a dangerous city back then. It was before it was gentrification, before gentrification hit and it made everything fancy and rich.
Yes. How do you feel New York has changed, say, from the '80s to now? Do you feel it's you know with everything going on? Do you think it's gotten back to that mid '80s vibe a little bit, or am I just
I mean,
imagining things too much?
definitely, it's still a really problematic city because it's so expensive to live there. When I first moved to New York, you could pick up a copy of the Village Voice, and there were listings for so many jobs. There were like, you could work there, quit, work there, quit. My rent was like, I don't know, I think I was paying like $200 a month.
Wow.
So it was
You can't
like,
even get a sink for that nowadays.
no, no. And so I feel like when a city is a little bit lawless and a little bit dangerous, young people come, working class people come, artists and musicians, and anyone can come to New York and get a cheap rent and get a job. And that's what New York was like in the 80s. And then by the 90s, rents were going up, and the working class was getting shoved out. And by working class, I include artists and writers and musicians, because you're not making enough money to stay in the city. So your city becomes much less rich of a place because it's just rich people. you know it's
Yeah.
like the street life isn't fun anymore. You don't like, there's way less creativity, and everything becomes more difficult.
Yeah. What advice would you give for someone who either wants to become a writer or is in that phase of trying things out?
I mean, I always tell everyone to just, write from the heart, like write exactly, even if it's like even if your thoughts are a little bit crazy, and your thoughts are, I don't mean crazy like, I mean like wacky, even if your ideas and things that going on in your head are odd and strange, just try and be honest. Like I feel like we wouldn't have been in so much in the trouble we're in now with social media, and they're finding out now that social media made a lot of young people feel small. Like, I don't
Didn't they
have
just do
that.
a study on social media and how
Yes,
it's not healthy for young kids and teenagers?
yes, and I think it's a double-edged sword. While people that were lonely and isolated and didn't fit in could find a friend group right on their computer, that was wonderful. You find your support. But the aspect of social media that was like, I have a beautiful life, I'm beautiful, I'm rich, I have, I think it just sort of like made a lot of people feel really bad. And you know I kind of wish people had started writing about that right out of the gate. Like, what, this is like, social media is making me feel like my life is junk, or whatever. So if you have thoughts that are like prescient or honest, or what you really, find a way to write about it, and um and then make a name for yourself at one of the independent companies. Or now, of course, printing has become so cheap, and you can do a Kickstarter. Or, when I first started in comics, people used to just draw, go to Kinko's, Xerox, staple it themselves, like the old fanzine style,
Yep.
go to comic book conventions with their handmade comic and sell it. And in fact, I remember that those two wonderful guys that made the Mutant Ninja Turtles, they were always at conventions, like drawing, and way. But so it's sort of like, I think Mocha in New York is a really good place to
Is
go.
Mocha still around?
Huh?
Is Mocha still around?
Yeah, it's every year in April. So it's connected now to SVA, the School of Visual Arts,
Oh
and
wow.
it's every year. It's a big space, and so many people are there with their homemade comics that they just printed themselves, printed out on their own computers,
Amazon stuff.
and stapled together. And I mean, this year I went and I bought like 22 to $5 comics, just from people that were just, it was their first thing. And what I loved about them is that they were all very distinctly a reflection of the author writer, a writer illustrator. They weren't trying to be superheroes. They weren't trying to be, I don't know, full of battles. They were very personal.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so I mean, it's like it's odd that that's how things started, with people just making homemade comics and Xeroxing them and stapling them, and that still happens at Comic Cons. But the printing has become cheaper, and you can lay the thing out online yourself with Photoshop, and you can move your art around and work digitally and then print.
That like I said, that's amazing. How many issues is the Storm series that just came out this week? A mini, or is it an ongoing?
It's a 5-issue series, and the idea there is, my editors Mark Basso and Drew are they're doing books called I did a Legends X-Men with them, where I brought back Mojo, Spiral, Major Domo, and Longshot. And it's kind of like the idea that the history of Marvel Comics is so rich that you can go back in time and pick up a comic and say, you know what? There are like behind the scenes stories you could tell, like what happened between those two panels. And a lot of the fans are like, they only want stuff new and now. That there is a certain amount of people that love a comic so much. And so my editors picked the issue when Storm put on the punk outfit. And they sent me that issue, and I read it. I hadn't read it since I was working in that office 30 years ago. And I went, that moment when Storm gets the haircut and doesn't tell anyone, and Kitty just is so upset. And at the same time, they have just taken in Rogue, who's from the Brotherhood. They're enemies. So they have a enemy in the mix. Kitty and Storm are furious at each other. And Storm's decided to look like a punk. And I went, you know what? This is a great little Chris Claremont moment, that I can really get into. So the 5 issues take place in that time period with a new villain and a new storyline, and Storm falls in love, and there's a whole new story. But
I
it really
do
is.
like issue one a lot, and I actually like your voice for Wolverine a lot in there, because I'm not going to spoil it, but I do like how you made Wolverine the voice of reason, challenging Storm in it.
Yeah, it's like he's an instinctual creature, and I think the fact that he's so close to his instincts, he senses things differently. I mean, Colossus is at a point in his life where he just obeys orders. I mean, when that story was written, it was the Soviet Union. Now it's the former Soviet Union. You're talking like a long time ago. So he's still of that mentality of just obeying orders. Rogue is just wild. I love writing her. She's really the most fun. And Xavier's in a wheelchair, and he's I think soon after that he could walk. I don't remember exactly when he got out of the wheelchair.
Yeah, it was during the whole Brood thing, if memory serves me correct.
Yeah. So, and Kitty is only 13, 14 years old, so she's really young. And so, you forget the reactions that a 13-year-old has to something. Their best friend getting a haircut without telling them, So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much fun. And then also, Sid Kotian, the artist, he really got that it should be an immature love, like her love with Peter. She's 13, he's probably 18. It's not that, when you look back on it, wasn't that appropriate of an age gap. And so Sid did this thing where he just sort of drew their scenes together as if they were a fantasy. He put them right in front of the mermaids at the amusement park.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, he really got that. In hindsight, it should be just a teen crush, not a real relationship. Even though they did go on to have a real relationship, back then we're basically saying, this was just a crush. So you also have what happens in the future. You have that to help you. Like, Kitty has now Kate Pride, and she's so powerful. So you can show how spunky and tough she is back then, because where she ends up.
Yeah, Kate
And
is my favorite X-Men of all time. It's
I
always
love her.
her Nightcrawler for me. I just so I could tell I matured, because when I was a teenager, I always wanted to be Wolverine.
Yeah.
I see myself being more the Nightcrawler, where the thing I always loved about him is that he was a man of faith in the books.
Yes. Yeah, and there are stories that I wish I could have. I only had 5 issues, and I had to focus on Storm, and Storm and Kitty and Storm and Rogue became. But I was able to put like a fun scene in with Nightcrawler to show how proud he is of how he looks. Like, he has a lot of complicated feelings about religion, but he's basically happy and proud of who he is. And so I was able to put that scene in where there's a girl on a beach who appreciates him, and it's I had a bunch of scenes in the upcoming issues about it, but you end up not being able to do everything for space reasons. And so there's two artists on the book, and Jorge, Geraldo Jorge, I'm probably saying his name wrong, takes over with issue 3, and he's so good. And so so I was lucky to get two great artists. And then I'm also doing Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel #1 comes out. And again, Paolo Villanelli, I don't know if you know his work. He's done like mostly Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I thought it sounded familiar for a second.
He's so good. He's just like, it's like working with an artist. It's like working with John Romita Jr. or Art Adams or someone. It's just, they lift your story up to a higher level. So that's been really, I'm very lucky right now.
Yeah, you also worked with one of my other favorite artists, David Aja, on Seeds.
Oh, thank you for
Seeds. Unfortunately, I thought I was gonna have my personal assistant read it to me, but I did not realize I sold out of the graphic novel Amazing Las Vegas Comic-Con when I was out there set up.
Oh, well, I think you could still get it. It's probably, I don't know, on Amazon for $10 or something.
Yeah, but how did that story come about? Because that's such a fun book.
David and I had done a short dareDevil story together, and we really enjoyed working with each other. It was a dareDevil Bullseye story.
Is that the one that was in issue 500?
Yes, and we really liked working with each other. And then literally like decades go by, and I got an email from David saying, "What are you doing?" And I wrote back, whatever I was doing. I think I was teaching film in Haiti at the time. I had become a filmmaker and a film teacher, and I was like just back from Haiti, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then we just started throwing ideas at each other and came up with the Seeds, which was originally called Scoop, and it was based on my time working in bullpens as a journalist. And we had done a whole concept where it would be all take place in the newsroom, and it was about like, journalists chasing crazy stories. And then the whole fake news thing hit, because this was like 2017. The fake news thing had hit, and we were like, we can't do this story, because it went from being just a fun story about journalists in a newsroom to feeling like too much of a commentary.
Too close to home?
Yeah, it felt like it went from if people would read it as if we were trying to say something about fake news. So we shrunk that idea down and built in the bigger narrative of people getting so sick of tech that they just wanted to throw their tech in the garbage and move somewhere where there was no tech,
That's easier than what I want to do. I just want to build a time machine and go back to like the mid 80s.
Yeah, well, it's funny because those of us that were raised pre-internet, we talk about how, remember when you just left your house in the morning and no one knew where you were, and you just got lost in life, and you wandered into a park and you met some people and went over to a roller rink, and life had a lot more like happenstance and kismet. There was no planning, things just kind of happened. And it's the internet's wonderful. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. But I also miss it's taken something from us. And I have a lot of young friends that can't even imagine what life was
Oh
like.
yeah, I was talking to my one of my friend's students, and I was like, "You guys don't realize how spoiled you are."
Yeah,
And they're just like, "Tell us about the before times when
yeah,
there was no internet." It's like, you used to put money in a phone.
yes. You know, I mean, it was a quarter. You had to put a quarter in a phone, and but my parents remember when you had to put a dime in a phone, and it's it's for instance, when I was writing comics in the 80s, I wanted, I had a lot of social justice issues in my comics, and when I wanted to write about the effect, there was this character Bullet, and he had a son Lance who was terrified of nuclear power, a nuclear event. And you actually had to go to the library, take out books.
Yep.
You couldn't just Google. Like now when I'm working on something, I can fact check everything. I can Google everything. Working on Storm, it's like, well, what is electromagnetic blah blah? What is lightning made of? And you just Google it fast and you get your answer.
So you had to go to
Whereas
the,
back
the library, pull out the index card, see what shelf the book was on.
Yeah, you had to make a list of things you need to research, take the subway to the library, look through the card catalog, take the book out. Read the whole thing, because there was no thing where you can do now where like you just search for lightning and you'll get the essence fast. So, that's a huge convenience. Uh but a lot of fun things happened on the subway on the way to the library, and you'd meet people in the library, and you'd, make a new friend in the library. Like there's like the fact that you had to work harder to find information was part of the fun of life.
Yeah. Uh, Convention season's coming up. You gonna be at any conventions throughout the summer?
Is what season?
It's convention season.
Um, I'm, right now I have, because I'm doing two books, Storm and Captain Marvel. I have, when you're writing two books a month, you really need to stay home and
I
work.
can respect that.
Yeah, so I have purposely not booked anything until New York Comic Con, and
Which
which
is
is
my favorite convention of the year because I don't have to travel anymore.
oh, you're in New York?
Yeah, well, this for the next 2 weeks I'm at my parents' house in Jersey, but I'm in between New York and Jersey.
Oh, okay. So where in Jersey? I grew up in Jersey.
I'm in West Milford.
Oh, okay. I'm in Bergen County. I was in Bergen County as a kid.
Yep.
Very north.
I'm Ramsey born and raised, so I know Bergen County very well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, we moved from New Brunswick to Hackensack to Oakland to right on the border of Franklin Lakes, Wyckoff. But I'm in Mawa a lot. My dad's in Mawa. So,
Yeah, my parents are in West Milford, so when I'm not, in Manhattan, I'm usually, or at my friend's house in Brooklyn. I'm usually here.
and how do you navigate Comic-Con in New York? Isn't it really hard with all the chaos?
Sometimes it's a pain in the butt. I mean, I normally do have friends in the industry. It's like you want a free ticket to New York Comic Con with me? It's like it does be my eyes. No, I don't. Like New York and San Diego are the two conventions I have no problem hiring sighted help for.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you want to go to New York Comic Con and get paid to be my seeing eye dog for the weekend.
Oh,
I normally don't have too much problem starting help the first two.
wow, that's wonderful. So they can describe everything to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite costumes are the mashups. I remember when I was writing Catwoman, and I went to, I think it was Emerald City Con, and there were a bunch of girls that had mashed up manga with Catwoman. And so they had like, they were half manga, half Catwoman. And I thought that is that the mashup costumes, which you don't see that often because people really want to have the whole full look, are
Yes.
really fun.
You know, that's what you did, right, Catwoman? What was it like writing Catwoman in the New 52 era?
I mean, the New 52 era, I think, was a great idea because it was like characters age. Like my Storm mini series that's out now takes place in the 80s. So you're talking almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I always think of Marvel, I always think of comic book time as for every 10 years is 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So Kitty's 13, 14 in this. And today, 50, today she's just barely leaked. She's 18, 19. So, you know, Catwoman's been around for like 60 years. So they wanted to make the characters young again. Uh, and I think it was a great idea. It was hard to figure out because my assignment with Catwoman was she isn't a great thief yet. She makes mistakes. And so the heist she was doing, she messes it up. She makes mistakes. She has a learning curve. And so it was a little bit, I think it was a little bit jarring for the fans that were used to Catwoman is the greatest thief ever to suddenly Catwoman is learning how to be a thief.
Learning as she goes along, which I really enjoyed. It's like, okay, you're watching the story of someone become into their own and discover, yes, I one day if I just work at this hard enough, I will become the greatest gas thief of all time.
Yeah, and if you know Catwoman, you know that she achieves the goal, but this was taking place in the past, even though it was the present. It wasn't like it was colored in, old timey colors. And it was the same for Green Arrow. It was like my assignment was he's just inherited all this wealth, but he's just like a playboy. He's like a cross between 007 and Elon Musk or something. And uh, again, it was like if you were a young brat of a kid handed $1 billion, you'd screw up. And that was kind of like, and to me, Green Arrow was always much more mature. He was lean, he was mean, he was stealthy. He was always like haunting.
I'm gonna confess, and I'll have you back on to review it. I still have to read the New 52 incarnation of Green Arrow because I stopped right when I knew it was being relaunched.
I mean, honestly, if you're going to read Green Arrow, I would say read the run after mine because I think Jeff Lemire, he came on after me, and
Jeff
he was.
Lemire did all right. Not. You see, now you just sold me on the New 52 Green Arrow.
Yeah, but I don't really particularly think my run was that great. I mean, it was it's not. It was fun, and I had fun. And then when Freddie Williams came on the book, we did a 3-part story called Harrow. That was a really fun story. But when Jeff came on, because when you work with an artist like, I don't know how to say his name, Sorrentino,
That sounds close enough.
Ari.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I think that's close enough to how it's pronounced, and I'm
Yeah,
going by what technology
and
tells me.
he's such a spectacular artist. You could just say, have someone walk down the street and it's spooky and it's going to be like a masterpiece. And I think that, um, I had stripped Arrow down and taken all his money from him and kind of left him at the bottom. And Jeff was able to do what I thought was a lot more fun and a lot more visually great stuff on the book. So Honestly, I would skip my run and start with Jeff's.
And so I'll give your. I love your work, so I'll give them both a shot. I'm really not, like I said. I just almost bought a piece of original art for the first time because it was one of Johnny's pieces from your dareDevil book.
Oh, is
But
that stuff?
I couldn't get the guy to agree on a price that was fair for both of us, so I had to walk away.
Is Johnny's art from that run expensive?
Yeah,
It
there's a
is.
page from there that from issue 255, and uh, I was like, you know what? That's the same price as my rent this month. I'm gonna have to just,
Yeah,
you know, adulting. But where can my audience find you online?
one thing I want to. I'm lucky in that Arthur Adams gave me a page of Long Shot, and it's Long Shot with all the kids, the kids on skateboards, and I love that page so much. And it's every once in a while I'll get an email from someone saying, like, I'll give you anything for that page. I've been offered as much as like $10,000. And I'm sort of like, I'm a writer. We are poor, we don't have money. And there's been a lot of times in my life when I needed that money. And then I'll take the page out and I just can't bear to part with it. It would be just so sad for me to not be able to look at it. So, you know,
Like I said, Longshot is a fun character. I have always enjoyed your work. Where can my audience find you online?
Oh, I'm on my name. It's actually Annie Nocneti. Uh, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I don't know. I'm not good at social media. Like Twitter is so confusing. I don't even know what's going on there. It's like when you, it's part of your obligation when you write comics that you have to do your own social media. So, I try to post and promote the new Captain Marvel book and the new Storm book on Twitter, but it just seems to be lost in a sea of whatever's going on there. I don't know.
Yeah, it gets buried.
It gets buried, and I'm just a pre-internet girl. So, I think of Facebook's for family. Instagram is where I post like weird pictures of nothing.
Yeah, that's like I said. That for me, Instagram, that's where it's like I discovered this great new pizzeria in the village. Let's take a picture of me eating it.
Yeah. I love Instagram because I just sort of like, I mean, I never post anything interesting. I just post weird things I see in the street, and
I,
it's, I find it fun. It's sort of like echo of your inner brain, and I'm very, very, I never post pictures of myself at some great glamorous event, I mean, every once in a while to promote someone else's work, but I very much don't want to become one of those people on Instagram who's trying to pretend their life is wonderful, you know?
yeah, I hear you. I really want to thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Yeah, sure. It was
I
a
want to
pleasure.
thank you for your entire body of work,
Thank
and
you.
I want to thank you for helping me learn that you don't need sight to have a vision.
No, you don't. Yes, wonderful. Well, maybe I'll see you at New York Con.
Hopefully, you have an amazing afternoon. Take care, Annie.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Well, everyone,